Iconic boy band / rap collective Brockhampton have unfortunately come to the end of their collective careers with the release of their latest record, The Family. Now, despite the relatively short length of the band's lifetime, they've certainly left their mark on this generation, becoming the summer soundtracks for countless teens and adults alike, and it's easy to see why. Brockhampton has been consistently producing and coming out with some of the greatest albums of the year for 6 albums straight now. It's very rare for a band to release as much music as Brockhampton has without a single dud. I love every single one of these albums, and whilst there was a slight shaky period after the forced departure of Ameer following his allegations, they quickly found their footing with a series of brilliant singles, and yet another very good album. Last year they boasted a feature with Danny Brown, who managed to really elevate their sound into something mesmerizing, acting as the first track for 2021's Roadrunner. All 13 members of the band truly get their chance to shine in every record, and I'm not going to go over all of them right now because, as we'll see, it's not too relevant for this album in particular, but some of my favourites are Joba and Kevin, who managed to deliver some intensely personal and tragic verses over an amazingly sinister instrumental in The Light, for example, and also Dom, who's one of the slickest and boldest rappers of today in my opinion, and he really manages to put out a fabulous level of edge into his sound. He kills it on every project, really taking tracks like Chain On to another level. It's no wonder the band works so well. This could be a stretch, but it's almost like a hip-hop, urbanized and modern version of the Beatles, insofar as that when you have so many intensely skilled artists who are experts in their respective aspects of music, of course you're going to get something great, provided egos don't get in the way, the chemistry is consistent and tensions are low, and there's a genuine passion in their collaborations. However, once again, much like the Beatles, when you have a band full of musicians who are good enough to go solo, it stops making sense for them to limit themselves by remaining in a band, which will ultimately lead to a breakup, which is exactly what we're getting now. The band has really matured over the years, putting the raw lightning-in-a-bottle sounds from their earlier work, such as the Saturation series, aside for a more serious and adult-themed lyrical journey, while still maintaining elements of the banger rap that brought them to our attention to begin with. A great example being Don't Shoot Up the Party, which put together nocturnal intros and a wailing chorus with some tremendously mature theming and a mix that worked amazingly, followed by a purely vocal track, Dear Lord, which features some sick vocal harmonies. And this is just for Roadrunner. I could discuss every Brockhampton album at huge lengths considering my fondness for them, but Roadrunner was the latest project before The Family, and despite its many pros, it obviously wasn't perfect by any means, despite the overwhelmingly positive slant, with some more lackadaisical and underwhelming tracks such as Count on Me that just seem slightly confused and messy, as well as some strange uses of auto-tune every now and then. In terms of hopes regarding The Family, we've been treated with 2 pretty vibey singles already, which I'll discuss in depth as I go track by track. The 17 tracks alongside the 35-minute length of the project presupposes to me, and I'm sure many other listeners, an all-killer, no-filler, constant barrage of each and every member showcasing their skills, being able to really make this final album something special. Well, as it turns out, the band has done something completely out of left field and released 2 albums. The Family ended up being a solo album from the founder Kevin Abstract, with the real finale, titled TM, releasing tomorrow at the time I'm recording this, which I will most likely cover in my next video. So to what extent is this pre-notion achieved, and does Kevin manage to make it work as well as us fans would like them to? Is this a grand and worthy, satisfying ending and send-off? Well, let's discuss. The Family opens with such a groovy and bouncy tune from Kevin, which is so fitting considering the occasion of the project. He goes through the history of the band, explaining what it means to them all, and that despite the disbanding of the group makes the promise that they're all still tight and on to bigger and better things. Who would have thought we made it off that damn forum? This is all undercut by such a fun instrumental that you can't help but vibe to. Such an incredible opener. Kevin absolutely kills it here. United we stand, divided we fall. I'm sorry homie, but that don't apply to us at all. Captures the vibe of this entire project. Heck, the entire band. It's what made them so beloved in the first place. They truly just do what they feel is best for them, and it always results in brilliantly sounding music. Take It Back perfectly encapsulates the feeling of such a momentous and triumphant occasion and sets you up for a rockin' and bustlin' half hour of tunes. RZA feels like the perfect ending track to an era. That powerfully optimistic bass line thrashing through the song alongside such meaningful and open lyrics makes you feel really hopeful for each and every member's future. It pays homage to the pivotal Wu-Tang Clan with zapping synth to accompany that bass line. Gold Teeth boasts an incredibly trippy Michael Jackson-style instrumental in which Kevin raps about Brockhampton's early days, as well as his Texas upbringing. Much like every track, it's pretty short, but this one especially is under 2 minutes with just one verse. But that verse is really tight, and the vocals are suitably bold and decisive. So it continues the vibe of the record very well with its phenomenal pulsing bass and snare productions. Big focuses on pressure Kevin feels from his label and fan base regarding the breakup. There's a lot of switches and disorienting changes, much like the rest of the album, which is certainly a brave choice for such a quick track. It's so wild, punchy, heavy, and aggressive with an insanely fat upbeat bass sample, especially in the intro. But this hard-hitting section quickly switches to a woodwind-inspired, dreamy and smooth instrumental. The lyrics are outgoing and humorous, and the chaos is wonderfully organised, weirdly enough. It's exactly what you'd expect from an album art like this. Best track so far, I love this one. All that, in my opinion, is the safest track on this thing, sampling from TLC's opener for a 90s Nickelodeon show of the same name, and it's a choice I don't think works as well as the rest of the record does. It's a lot simpler and more conventional in terms of structure and length, and it doesn't do anything badly, but I don't think it does anything too well or notable either, particularly the aforementioned sample and hook that I can't get behind as much as I'd like to. It's pretty hit or miss as far as Kevin's music goes, but certainly not bad. Back from the Road is another one I'm not too crazy about. It starts to kick in around this point that this isn't at all a Brockhampton album. It's only a 13th of the band, and so there's not much variety as you'd expect from a Brockhampton record. I always thought that Kevin had the best hooks, but without Matt you don't get those incredibly tight and silky smooth flows. Without Dom, the lyrics aren't as profound as they could be. You don't have Merlin's energy, Bareface's powerful voice, Jabari and Kiko's beats, or Emil's eyebrows. This track is pretty messy, and whilst it has some interesting ideas, I don't think it works as well as the rest of the record does. I still wouldn't call it bad by any means, and I really like the outro, but it's certainly the worst so far. Basement is one designed for the club with its wobbly sub-basses, but it honestly feels slightly lazy, especially in comparison to the start of the record. The short length of these songs is beginning to feel more like a gimmick rather than an artistic choice. It's rather claustrophobic in its bass-led instrumentation, so perhaps it's supposed to make you feel slightly unsettled. Maybe it's just not for me, this one. Good Time takes an undoubtedly Tyler the Creator-inspired approach to the production, and it works pretty well for the vibe it's going for. The piano and choral samples ring in the background whilst Kevin commemorates the loss and gradual decay of friendships within the group. Southside is pretty... look, I don't even know what this one is. The album's worst track by far. I think the 808s are far too harshly distorted and the bursts of white noise are completely out of left field. With a title like Boyband, you'd expect a slight return to form in terms of quality, and luckily we get that in what I'm glad to say is the best bop on this project for a while. Kevin goes in with an amazing hook and strong vocals. The backing track is fun and euphoric, providing a strong energy for the underbelly of this song. We get some more retrospective lyrics on the band's quickest production times and experience in the iconic Abbey Road studios, where Iridescence was recorded in 7 days, then mixed by Joba in 3. I'm not too sure how I feel about the abrupt Bareface outro, but maybe it'll grow on me. It definitely doesn't ruin the song at all. 37th is a blatantly Kanye-inspired flow, and sound that works pretty well for what it is, as Kevin opens up over a chopped and screwed soul sample, rapping about his attempts for peace of mind. Any Way You Want Me is a pretty shivering and cinematic one with a well-done spoken outro and a nice-sounding hook. The dreamy instrumental goes well with the wavy vocal delivery and sweet lyrics. Prayer is another clearly Kanye-inspired one where Kev really gives it his all in terms of singing, and he does a really good job. The synth chords are entrancing, and I like the theme of not wanting to move on from this chapter in his life which he enjoyed so much, begging God not to make him grow up. The Frank Ocean influence is heavy on My American Life, which might be the most raw and emotional song on the record, and its simplicity as well as its masterfully layered vocal harmonies make for a truly euphoric minute and a half. The Family's title track is great. It's chock-a-block full of meaningful lyrics and feels like a real ode to the fanbase. It's a track that really rewards the hardcore fans for being on this journey, referencing a lot of moments that you might not know unless you're really familiar with the band, such as the re-release of the Sugar music video. And I've got to admit, the one good thing about this being a solo project is that when Bareface comes in at the end of this tune, it's so unexpected and beautiful that any longtime fan would get goosebumps, even if I'm pretty sure it's an old or unused recording. The penultimate song, ironically called The Ending, has a really vibey blues sample. It's a very thoughtful and personal track. I like the instrumental and attitude, but unfortunately the short runtime of this record isn't working as well as I think Kevin thought it would. Like I said at the start, when you see the 35-minute length, you think it's all killer, no filler. But what we end up with is a listing of tracks that work well sometimes, but also sometimes feel a little rushed, overfilled, or very abruptly ending in an unenjoyable way. Such as this one, which is definitely a good song, just with an underwhelming conclusion, which is weirdly poetic and fitting considering the sentiment of this album, but we'll get to that. Brockhampton is Kevin's farewell to the band he created when he was 14. He speaks from the heart about issues the band has had throughout the course of their stardom. He speaks on fights he's had with the members of the group, labels pressures to pursue more commercial approaches to their 2021 album Roadrunner, despite that album's darker undertones, He touches on how he's gotten back in touch with former member Ameer and how it put a strain on some of their relationships in the group. Despite the tension, Kevin ends the track with acknowledging the members' talents and how they all have amazing solo careers afterwards. Kev truly saved the best till last. This is the best song on the record, no doubt aided by the longer length of the tune, clocking in at 4.5 minutes. I just wish we had more of this, to be honest. This is exactly what Brockhampton's fans were looking for. Even though it's still a solo song, it's so sentimental that you barely care, as Kevin lists his bandmates and their qualities amongst genuinely heart-wrenching and emotional goodbye verses to both the fanbase and the rappers who made Brockhampton possible. It's only occurring to me now that the early Kanye inspiration is actually rather fitting for a band that met on a Kanye forum, so perhaps that's why Kevin made that choice. My only complaint with this song is that once again the ending was very abrupt, especially for what's supposedly a finale. I would have preferred a more traditional outro, but perhaps it'll link with the album that they're releasing tomorrow. Listen, before I give this album a rating, I need to say some things about the very concept. I enjoyed this project. I thought it was rather good, but I just can't get behind it being a solo project. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy Kevin's music and I'm all for the band's future solo ventures, but the issue I have is that it wasn't marketed as such. It was marketed as a Brockhampton record, a final goodbye, one last hurrah, and unfortunately, we're not really treated with that conclusivity. Even the ending of the final track was far too sudden. I understand that the boys have largely separated and gone their separate ways, making a collaborative project perhaps impossible, but that doesn't excuse the borderline false advertising. This would have worked far better as a solo album, and that's that. I know that another album is releasing tomorrow, but from what I can understand, it's comprised of shelved recordings from the band's 2021 California session, which Matt Champion has probably attempted to make seem as seamless and purposeful as possible. So we'll have to see how that pans out before I say anything too drastic and conclusive. This is just how I'm feeling at this exact moment. In terms of the sound exclusively, the album's greatest qualities sonically are Bareface's productions and the very solid verses, whilst the worst aspect is probably the excessive revisiting of concepts that get a little too old at points, as well as the abrupt endings that really could have gone on for longer. I'm giving The Family by Kevin Abstract / Brockhampton a 6 out of 10. It's closer to a 7 than it is a 5. Here's to hoping that the next one delivers. As always, a like, comment and subscription would be very much appreciated. I'll catch you all later. Much love.